Hello and welcome to the CPD Group podcast. Join us as we guide you through all things CPD, interview some special guests and offer advice to help your business thrive. We hope you enjoy listening. Hello everybody and welcome back to the CPD Group podcast. Today we're doing a podcast about creating and developing high quality training and learning materials, okay? So we've invited one of our advisory panel members, Kevin Robinson, in today. He's also the owner and founder of yourcopywriter.com. So Kevin's come in today to have a quick chat with us about developing these materials and what's some hints and tips of how to do things properly and make the most of your learning materials and your training courses. So welcome, Kevin.
Thanks.
How are you? You all right?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. Yeah, really good.
I've even noticed the local church are ringing the bells, signifying your arrival in the building.
I watched them rush across the grass quick to get them started when they saw me arriving. They had spotters on the road.
Excellent. They definitely knew you were coming.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Super. So, how are you today? You well? Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, it's great of you to come in and see us.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to do it. You know, that's if being here today helps people out and it gives them some good advice, and I'm more than happy to do it. That's what we're here for, isn't it?
Brilliant. Good stuff, Kevin. Thanks. So tell us about you, your background, yourcopywriter.com, you know, where did it all begin? And also tell us a bit about your experience with creating and developing learning materials.
Sure. Okay. Well, I started my career longer ago than I'm prepared to talk about, frankly. I was in corporate sales. I was in international sales and marketing. And in quite a technical area, and that involved quite a bit of training of sales teams and quite a bit of training. And I loved doing that. And then in 99, I did a bit of a, again, show my age a little bit of a Reggie Perrin, and just suddenly woke up one morning and thought, this is not what I want to do. And I went and retrained. I've been a musician for many years. I went and retrained intending to become a sound engineer and came out the other end as a video producer, director and a screenwriter rather than anything to do with sound in any way, shape or form. And then, as a result of that, because I was that stage in my 30s, you know, the School of Art I was at said, would I like to stop on and do some mentoring and teaching, which I did. Then I became the course leaders for the BTEC courses for the Performing Arts and the Media Department there. Then I did a master's degree in screenwriting and obviously teaching qualifications and all the stuff that goes with it. And then I was asked to become a external verifier for schools and colleges for BTEC courses by Pearson EdExcel, as well as an examiner. And I kind of carried on doing that in a variety of roles, either full-time and then off to universities, teaching there and things for many years. So up until, I was still teaching on a regular basis up until about a couple of years ago. And in that time, experience-wise, well, one of the things that I think very early, I realised the importance of content and the importance of delivery of that content and the right environments and all that sort of stuff and the value of that to teaching. And the experience of verifying colleges, which was, I guess, quite a scary experience for the colleges because you turn up on the, you know, I had a big leather coat I used to wear on purpose to add a bit of menace, you know. And you were looking at people's courses and you were looking at what they were doing. And sometimes you saw these amazing things, you know, these things that people had done, this incredible work to do something innovative and to do, you know, to measure. And it kind of sparked an interest in me in that use of that content. And then when I later went on to become a media producer independently as well, outside the education system, I started my own companies, been self-employed for now about 10 years. What I realised was that experience I had, as well as my academic side, which was the narrative experience, you know, the storytelling side, made this creation of courses easier. It made it more adaptable. It made it more focused. So I started to then also consult with online training courses, and I've written more courses now than I care to remember. I'm not going to say, it sounds like I'm showing off if I do, but several. I helped to rewrite the higher national diplomas for BTECs. I've written several courses, access to university courses, online training courses, and everything from very serious stuff like child protection through to food hygiene, which is similarly very serious, obviously, but you know, on a variety of subjects. And the reason I can write courses and people are happy for me to write courses on a variety of subjects is the skill is in the creation of the course. The content of the course is available to anybody. The skill is in the delivery. And that's, I think, where the focus is, and I guess why, I'm kind of happy to help out with the CPD stuff, because it's fantastic when people get a good course that way, and they learn and they go on, and that's me. Does that answer the question? Can I stop talking now? I couldn't stop talking then. Could I just carry on?
Brilliant. It's great to get that kind of, little view into your past life and what you've been up to, because you have a wealth of experience from what we've just talked about there. I mean, me and you have talked off camera before, in terms of the advisory panel and things like that. So I have a bit of an understanding of where you've been and what you've been doing over the years. And, you've got that wealth of knowledge, which is why we're so happy to have you on the panel, because that experience can only help in the work that we're doing to help raise standards of CPD across the globe.
Yeah, it is about standards. That's what attracted me to do it, was the standards. 40 years of training and teaching and educating and helping students do everything from writing dissertations to learning basic key skills, being on the CPD panel felt like an opportunity to do a bit, I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, but to make a bit of a difference in things, and to get it done right. So, yeah. No,
that's exactly what we're looking for. That's what the panel's there for, to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing. Because we are here to raise standards, we are here to make a difference, as you say, but we need to have that independent body out there that actually looks at what we're doing and making sure that we're doing it correctly. And that's the panel, so it's great that you're on board, and thanks for joining us on that as well.
Happy to do it, absolutely.
So, looking at specific types of training, we'll do that later on in the podcast, okay? We'll look at the kind of different types of training that are there and get your advice and guidance around that. But in general, in more of general term, what would you say, or what's your hints and tips for quality content and quality learning materials? What would you advise in that area? What's the focus?
I mean, it's a hard question, that, because there's a lot. I mean, I suppose the easiest way is to turn that on its head and say in 20-odd years of that, 40-odd years of training and teaching, whatever, where do I see the most mistakes? I guess if there's one thing I would say, it's learner first. It's not about you. It's not about your specialism. It's not about what you're passionate or interested in, although that will help. We'll probably talk a bit about that later, being passionate about what you're teaching. But it's about learner first. You quite... occasionally you come across courses, I nearly said quite often then, I didn't mean it quite as bad as that, but occasionally you do come across a course where the content is amazing, but it's targeted too high. It's not right for the learners, or it's brilliant and it's not delivered in a way that works. So I guess if I was picking one thing for anybody writing a course, it's know who's taking that course and teach to them, not to yourself. Teach to them.
Great. Yeah, that's perfect advice, really, because that ultimately is the person that's going to be benefiting from the training in the end, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And as part of our panel, you're aware of our accredited frameworks that we use. So in your opinion, how does having that published and having it public and actually having a set framework for people to work towards help ensure quality, and, our listeners and viewers, they may well want to know a bit more about the framework and how that kind of approach and having a set framework to work to helps in the ultimate goal of creating a course.
Yeah, I honestly can't praise that high enough. I cannot, praise the idea of the accredited framework in the CPD environment highly enough. It's a simple, very accessible way of saying, does my course, does my content match these values? So, for instance, accessibility is one that people sometimes stumble on a lot, Oh, well, I've got to do massive things in my course. But if you are being as accessible to many people as possible, then you've ticked a bit of the framework off, So what it does is it gives you exactly what it says. It gives you a framework, a grid to work in, So you can say, am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I testing? Is this aimed at the right people? Am I being innovative? Really, have I tried here? Have I done? And as long as you can honestly look at the framework and say, I hit every mark, then I can't see how you can write a bad course or put a bad event together or have a bad apprenticeship program or whatever, because the principles of the accredited framework are the principles of any good learning experience. So, what you're doing here is not dissimilar by putting the accredited framework on. It's not dissimilar to how for instance, Sitting Guilds and BTECs and things like that work, where they say, these are our goals. You take your learners to that goal. And I think that's the right word, another thing to remember as well. When you're looking at the accredited framework, learners, do these help learning? Do they help the learner do what they're here for? Do they help them learn? So as long as you can individualise that down to your course and you hit those marks, it's fantastic. I think it's a brilliant idea. It's really well designed. And a nice mnemonic as well to remember it by, which is always good.
Absolutely.
Love a good mnemonic.
Yeah, you've got to, haven't you? But no, it does what it says on the tin for us. You know, it's about, again, it's all about this raising of standards and trying to bring everyone up to a universal position when they're creating their courses, you know, so that the standards continue to grow throughout the training world. You know, it's really important to us. And again, having members like you on the panel to help drive that forward and keep reviewing it for us as well to make sure that it's relevant, make sure it's up to date, and we're asking the right questions of people, you know. So that kind of experience is really, really helpful. And I'm glad you look at the framework in such a way.
Yeah.
You know, now touching back on what you said before about the amount of experience and work that you've done in the online space and creating online courses. So what, from your professional opinion then, would you suggest is, you know, good things, good elements, good practice for creating an online course?
Okay, it's a very good question. That one of the things about creating online courses is there is this myth, I'm going to say myth, it's the right word, that you create a course, you put it online, people will come and buy it for the next 10 years and you can relax and roll around on a big bed of money because of it. So I think the number one principle for creating an online course, you know, you mentioned it, it's got to be up to date, it's got to be in the now, you know, and you need to be reviewing it regularly and looking at your content, looking at how it's phrased even sometimes. You know, over the last 3 years, we've seen changes such as governing pronouns. You know, if you've got a course where you're not acknowledging pronouns and the various pronouns that people tend to use now, you're behind the times. Cool, update your content. So I think, you know, what makes a really good course from engaging the learners is making sure that you're speaking their language and talking to them in a way they get. Secondly, just because it's online doesn't mean the course has to be death by PowerPoint in 10 modules over, you know, an exam at the end. You've been doing, you know, CPD Group, you're doing some innovative things with QR codes in magazines and all sorts of stuff, and there's no reason why you should approach your training, your online coaching, your online training, and in fact, I'll extend this out, you should do this with any form of learning and say this is how it's done. As soon as you start to say this is how it's done, I think you're starting to lose, you know. I don't mind you saying this is how it's done and here's why, if that's right. But think, you know, be creative. You're not face-to-face, so what are the advantages of online? Where can they can get downloads, you can send people off to research. They've got the whole of Google at their disposal. Use those things and use the online world rather than focus on what it can't do and go, oh, well, I'll just do a PowerPoint and a bit of video. It's not working. Video's great, but it's not a long-term learning tool. It's great in small bursts. So do something else. Go give people tasks. Get them to come back, fill the answers in a quiz. Quizzes, you know, at the end of every module, little tests to keep people engaged. The advantage of online, of course, is you're not fixed in a classroom. Small bursts. Give people things in small bursts. Get you out of the mentality of an hour-long training session. Doesn't matter if 5 minutes works for a subject, do 5 minutes, you know. So it's about adaptability, and it's about using the online environment, I think.
And out there now as well, Kevin, there's so many different tools available to people, isn't there? You know, and there's lots of different things. I mean, going back to the PowerPoint to death piece, you know, we have seen that quite a lot with courses that are submitted for accreditation, you know, where they've tried to transfer their in-classroom course to the online space, and they've literally just put the PowerPoint straight up on the screen for people to read. Now, the one element that they seem to be missing from that is the knowledge of the individual who was standing at the front of the classroom. You know, it's trying to get that knowledge, which comes as the flow of a classroom course moves on. Yeah. It comes out of the individual with the experience, the tutor. You know, so it's about trying to take that information out of their head and then putting that into the actual presentation somehow as well. Yeah. You know, we see that quite frequently where that element seems to be missing, and that's where the true value of the learning actually sits. You know, what's your opinion on that side of things?
There's an analogy I used for this. I think if I remember right, I used it on one of the videos I did for CPD about if you look at your course and look at the environment it's in, and the environment is really the biggest change in the delivery is as you just pointed out, it's the environment it's being delivered in. So you can stand in front of you know, a group of 20 people and deliver a training on agile or training on food hygiene, whatever it is, and they've got you there to interact. You can see the body language, you can see how they're doing, you can go and help the people who are struggling, you can do all that sort of stuff. You can't do that online. So clearly, whatever you have produced for a classroom may be perfectly valid in terms of the content. And like I said earlier, I see some great content sometimes that is delivered incredibly well. Sometimes I see great content that is falling flat because it's not being delivered at all. It's just being put up on screen. There is a place sometimes, particularly with very serious subjects that require a lot of absorption of using a lot of text and very clear and because that's simply the best way to learn things that are fact heavy is that way. Most of the time it isn't. Most of the time that's just boring and frankly quite annoying. So think about your environment, learner, then the environment they're going into. When you're talking about online, what we see is a lot of courses, a lot of the courses I've worked on, and I rewrote a couple of courses for this very reason. What somebody's done is they've gone and used, pardon the analogy here, they've gone, I've got a pet, and I need somewhere for that pet to live. So they buy a pet home and a pet, but what they buy is a fish and a bird cage. So in theory, they did right. In theory, and it's the same with a class. In theory, you can lift everything out, can't you, from your classroom? Just put it online. You've actually done is put a fish in a bird cage. Your environment online is not the same thing, and you haven't got a bird, you've got a fish. So let's, change the way you look at this thing would be my advice. Here's my environment. How do I use it? Not what's its restrictions. How do I use this? And then take your content you've already got and change it to fit. Repurpose, don't reuse, is a good way to think about it.
That's good advice, absolutely. No, I do like your analogy there of putting a fish in a bird cage. I mean, it is absolutely correct, isn't it? You have done the right thing in terms of getting the pet and getting the home and putting them together.
Yeah.
But it's just not suitable.
No, particularly for the fish.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So in terms of actually, if you were to advise me today, I was creating an online course here today, and, what would you advise in terms of how do I structure it in a way? Do I do short, sharp blasts of information? Do I, as you say, put quizzes at the end of every module or things like that? Should I use gamification to try to attract different people to keep them interacting with my course, or, virtual reality? Is that something that's coming in? I mean, what would you advise in that area?
Yes, to all of those things. I mean, this is some things work really well online. Gamification, you talked about that. That's a fantastic way of dealing with it. Little quizzes. I saw a great course a couple of years ago that used a technique whereby they would go, they give you a scenario, and then you'd get to the end and it'd go, obviously that's a made-up scenario, but what's wrong with it? And then you could go back and the learner got to then go back and review. And then on the next page, there was a little quiz that said, okay, here's some suggestions that might be wrong with it. Which do you think is it? And then another quiz that said, so which is the worst of them? And it narrowed it down. It did this thing where from the usual you go, no, I can get better, until you get to the right answer. So instead of going, here's what's wrong, moving on, it went, well, you tell me what's wrong. You figure this out. Because one of the advantages of classrooms is you can go to a learner and go on, you know this, do it. Go on, you can get it. Online, you don't have that interactivity necessarily. So put things in that simulate it. So gamification, yes, absolutely. Short and sharp, yes. Try and think even in longer modules. I appreciate sometimes you need to do, particularly on technical subjects, you need to do a longer section because you've got things that are linked together. That doesn't mean it has to be one long section. Do 5 minutes, stop, put a break point in, whether that's a quiz or a fun fact, or one of the techniques I used was when we did some child protection training, actually, and it's a horrible subject. Nobody wants to look at that. Nobody wants to do it, and it needs a break. And you're dealing with some pretty horrible things. Human beings can be terrible to each other, And so what we did is we put what we call espresso facts in. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes into a module that's getting heavy, we'd put a little bit of music and break away, and it'd go, espresso facts. Did you know that with this, because we were talking about digital safeguarding, did you know that 100 million hours of video are uploaded to YouTube every day? It's amazing, isn't it? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, back to the course. No educational value in that fact. But from a learner's point of view, huge value because they got to stop thinking about the horrible thing they had to think about take a little break, take a little mental break before they get back into that thing. So there's techniques you can use like that, little things, short bursts. Don't push it too hard. Don't assume that the learner is as passionate and interested as you are. That's another one.
Yeah, very good advice.
That's advice across all learning. You may love it. You may think that, the tax laws in Belgium are incredibly interesting. It might be just you, mate. So break it down. Or find things that, if you're passionate about something, you're interested in something, find the things that made you interested and put them in. They don't have to all be about learning. It's about engagement. It's about getting learners into your world. Voiceover over PowerPoints. I don't know. I'm trying not. I nearly swore then at this. You see a training course and the PowerPoint comes up and somebody reads what's on the PowerPoint and it's in subtitles as well underneath. And you think, well, I'm all in favour of making sure the information gets across, but really what was the voiceover doing? And I don't object to the, obviously for reasons of inclusivity to the thing being read out. But there's nothing to say that you then cannot use that voiceover in another way as well. Introduce the slide. When people do PowerPoint presentations in person, they very rarely just read what's on the slide. So, the voiceover should be saying, okay, so, we're going to talk about somebody got food hygiene on the brain today. So we're going to talk about the, hazard points within a kitchen in a minute. And I've got a slide I'll go through with you. And that can be happening before the slide appears. Engage people, tell them what they're learning about, then go to your slide. Yes, read it. Yes, make sure it's on subtitles for inclusivity, but just 20 minutes of somebody reading what's on screen to you isn't really teaching, Yeah. So there's all sorts of things you can do. I mean, the other thing I would say as well on this, sorry, this is sort of strayed into an area where I have many frustrations. We were talking just before the start of the recording about the use of video. Okay, video is a great tool, fantastic learning tool, but it has its limitations. You can, on video, it's better off to focus and just go one thing, done quickly, as fast as possible, do your message and get out. And there's a reason that people's attention span for videos is not quite as short as you'll read on the internet, but, a minute and a half into video, people are wondering, because we're conditioned to that from television. If years of television are chatting to the kids while you're watching TV and things, So video doesn't grab the focus the same way that a teacher in a classroom will grab focus. And you have to be aware of that. Use it sparingly, use it when it's relevant. Then go to something else. Then go to your PowerPoint, your voiceover, or go to a quiz, or, keep that stuff varied, keep it changing. Because a disengaged learner is just disengaged. They're not learning. They're not learning at all. And you very quickly and very easily, if you don't do the things we're talking about here, we don't do things like the gamification, if the learner gets no gratification from learning, what you end up with is the very opposite of everything that the accreditation framework and CPD is about, which is what you've got is somebody who sat there for 2 hours and then took the number away and didn't actually learn anything. And I'm really sorry, be a little blunt, you did it wrong if that's what happened. You just did it wrong. That's not what they're there. They were there to learn.
I completely agree. Now, I think there's some wonderful advice in there, Kevin. Thank you for that. Online, post-COVID, lots of people have been moving their training to an online space. So it's really important that these messages get out to people, so that they can make the most of their training. But not only that the consumer, the learner at the end, is actually getting the benefit from what they are ultimately paying for, that kind of thing. So it's really important and great advice. Thank you. Thank you for listening to part 1 of this podcast. We hope you found it useful. Look out for the next part coming soon, where we discuss how to create an effective classroom course. See you again soon.